$13 billion. I want you to just take a second and let that number sink in. That is the unprecedented, record-breaking revenue projected for the 4-year cycle of the 2026 World Cup. It's a staggering figure, honestly. It elevates this tournament from just a mere sporting event to literally one of the largest commercial enterprises ever staged in global sports history.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking an objective, balance sheet approach to deconstruct the massive, massive economics behind the 2026 World Cup. We're going to follow the money to see exactly how a sporting event generates the GDP of a small nation and, perhaps more importantly, where all that money actually goes.
Here's how we're breaking down our balance sheet today. First up, the biggest tournament ever. 2, following the billions. 3, the fan price tag. 4, the host city burden. And finally, who really profits?
All right, let's jump right into part 1, the biggest tournament ever.
To really grasp the economics of the 2026 World Cup, you first have to understand its sheer physical footprint. I mean, the 2026 tournament is expanding from 32 teams to 48 teams. That means 104 matches spread across 3 massive host countries, the US, Mexico, and Canada, and 16 different host cities. This expansion fundamentally alters the economics of the whole competition. More teams create more fixtures, and more fixtures create this massive, continent-spanning commercial inventory for broadcasters, advertisers, and corporate partners. Because of that incredible scale, analysts project the total economic activity across North America could hit a staggering $40 billion. To put that into perspective, that is roughly the entire GDP of a country like Iceland. That macro projection is exactly why global advertisers are expected to invest upwards of $10.5 billion just to capitalize on the audience. You know, in an era where media consumption is incredibly fragmented, the World Cup remains one of the very rare moments where billions of people are looking at the exact same thing at the exact same time.
Moving right along to section 2, following the billions.
So the macroeconomic pie is huge, but let's pivot to the assets column of our balance sheet and look specifically at the event organizer. Out of that broader $13 billion 4-year cycle, the 2026 tournament itself is budgeted to generate $8.9 billion. Because of the expanded match inventory we just talked about, TV broadcasting rights are pushed to an all-time high of $3.9 billion. Marketing and sponsorships bring in another $1.8 billion, but I really want you to focus on that $3 billion slice for hospitality and ticket sales. That ticketing and hospitality figure represents a jaw-dropping 216% jump compared to the matchday revenues from the 2022 Qatar World Cup. It rockets from $950 million all the way up to $3 billion. This is hands down the greatest driver of financial success for the 2026 event. The sheer number of matches, combined with the incredibly lucrative North American market and the rollout of dynamic pricing, allows FIFA to push the envelope on ticket revenues like never before.
Which brings us to section 3, the fan price tag. Now, that unprecedented revenue has to come from somewhere, right? Let's flip over to the liabilities side and see how this translates into real-world costs for the fans. Data shows that for 2 people to follow a single team to all its matches, the estimated travel and ticketing budget is a massive $62,000. Think about that. You could literally buy a luxury car for that amount of money. On a micro level, if you want the most expensive ticket to the final at the New York/New Jersey Stadium, you're looking at $10,990, which is nearly 7 times the top price in Qatar. And getting to the game isn't cheap either. A proposed NJ Transit round trip from Manhattan to the stadium has been priced at $150. All of this leads perfectly into a quote from The Athletic that really hit the nail on the head. They note, "The great paradox of this historic, expansive World Cup is that it threatens to be the least accessible edition so far." See, by expanding the 48 teams, the tournament blew open its doors to more nations and communities than ever before. Yet, because of these exorbitant prices, dynamic ticketing, and just immense travel demands, it simultaneously risks becoming the most exclusive, completely shutting out the average fan.
Okay, let's look at section 4, the host city burden. It turns out the everyday fan isn't the only one feeling the financial squeeze here. When we compare the risks and rewards at the municipal level, FIFA clearly controls the most valuable assets. They retain the ticket, broadcast, and sponsor revenues, and they historically secure sweeping federal tax exemptions. On the flip side, the host cities are contractually obligated to pay for safety, security, and public transit using public funds, and that is a burden estimated to cost anywhere between $100 to $200 million per U.S. city.
Now, to be fair, host cities do see local economic boosts. In the Dallas-Fort Worth area, for instance, Airbnb guests are projected to spend an average of $511 per night on accommodation, dining, and entertainment. And that's fantastic for local hospitality workers and short-term rental hosts, who are projected to earn millions during the tournament. However, economists consistently caution that this spending is highly concentrated and, above all, temporary. Once the tournament packs up and leaves, that spending surge leaves right along with it.
Because that local economic surge doesn't always cover the upfront public costs, we are seeing some significant friction points emerge. In New Jersey, the governor actually pushed back on a $48 million transit funding gap because FIFA does not subsidize it. To manage their budgets, cities like New York and Seattle have had to scale back or outright cancel their official publicly funded fan festivals. And up in Canada, officials acknowledge that the Vancouver and Toronto games are being almost exclusively bankrolled by taxpayers, which is prompting serious sticker shock and debates over how mega events should even be funded. Finally, Section 5, who really profits?
So we've looked at the massive revenues, the crazy fan costs, and the heavy host city obligations. To synthesize this entire balance sheet, this quote from Professor Michael Edwards at NC State really cuts to the core of the issue. Economic impact studies love to highlight the total money flowing into a city, but they very often overlook the taxpayer costs required to stage the event in the first place. As Professor Edwards points out, local businesses do win temporarily for sure, but FIFA fundamentally controls and captures the scalable wealth. Governments and taxpayers ultimately assume much of the financial risk. So you might be wondering, why on earth do cities do it? Well, economists point to a concept called psychic income. This is the intangible return. It's the global visibility, the civic pride, the excitement, and that shared sense of community that comes from hosting a major international event. It's the chance to share an experience that feels so much larger than just an ordinary sporting event. For host cities, this psychic income, along with maybe some accelerated infrastructure projects, is very often the true primary return, rather than any actual net financial growth. Which leaves us with this final thought. The 2026 World Cup is absolutely a marvel of modern sports commerce. It is a multi-billion-dollar economic engine spanning an entire continent. But as we've seen on our balance sheet today, there is a staggering disparity between the public costs assumed by everyday fans and host cities and the private tax-exempt profits captured by the organizers. So when the final whistle blows in 2026 and that temporary economic surge fades away, who truly wins? I'll leave you to reflect on that. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the numbers behind the beautiful game.